Welcome to Leaders Lead Podcast. Are you ready to conquer your challenges and achieve greatness? Join us as we dive into inspirational stories of industry leaders who have overcome adversity and reached new heights. Get ready for electrifying insights and captivating conversations that will ignite your passions for success. This is your go-to show for empowerment, growth, and leadership. Buckle up. Leaders Lead Podcast is here to take you on a transformational ride.
We'll jump back into your episode in a minute, but first let me ask you something. Are you great at what you do, but it still feels like no one really sees you as the go-to expert in your space? You're showing up, maybe putting out content, speaking on a few podcasts, but the visibility, the growth, the income, it still feels out of reach. That's exactly why I created the Experts Blueprint. It's a step-by-step system that I use to help coaches, consultants, and purpose-driven experts finally get visible, grow your loyal audience, and turn their message into income. Inside, I'll show you how to craft your story so people actually remember it, build a platform that works for you 24/7, and create content that builds trust and moves people into action. If you're ready to stop being overlooked and start getting the recognition, the results that you deserve, join the waitlist by emailing me at info@tonytaylorinspires.com. Let's build something real. Let's get you seen. Welcome back to your episode. Welcome, everybody. This is Leaders Lead the Podcast. I am super excited. I have I would say my heroes, Mr. Alan Weiss. I've been really indulging in his work for quite some time, especially when I got on the speaking circuit. I started speaking and I read his book, The $1 Million Speaker. Once my speaking game evolved a little bit, I read his book, The $1 Million Consultant, and it just blew my freaking mind. So my goal for you today is for us to talk to Alan, for us to extract some of the things, some of the burning questions that I've had. And my hope is that you'll walk away with some information that'll help you on your journey. If you're a speaker, if you're a consultant, if you're a podcast, and anything that has to do with business and just being an amazing human being like Alan is, that's what we're trying to glean from him. So welcome to Leaders Lead Podcast today, Alan. I'm super grateful to have you.
Thanks, Tony. Happy to be with you.
Yeah. So I want to first ask this one question. You sent me an email. After I sent you an email, you listened to the show. And one thing that you said, I don't know if you remember this, but you said, hey, I'll let you know one thing. When I come on the show, I'm not going to be telling lies about Napoleon Hill. Can you expound on that for me?
Well, that was one of the examples you gave me, Think and Grow Rich and Napoleon Hill, and you were talking about that. And the fact is that Napoleon Hill was a con man. And he would, for example, he said he coached Andrew Carnegie, but in fact, what he did was he got himself into a picture. He sort of photobombed himself into a picture with Carnegie and claimed that they were the friends and he was a client. And of course, Carnegie never even knew him. And Napoleon Hill was a reprobate. He was a drunk. He was miserable to women. The only book that ever made it was Think and Grow Rich, and he squandered all of those royalties. And the reason I know this is that I used to work for the guy who bailed Hill out. His name was W. Clement Stone. It's worth about $400 million, made his money in the insurance business, and he went into sort of positive mental attitude. But Stone knew Hill well, and he bailed him out at the end. So that's why everybody quoting Napoleon Hill today, I see nothing there.
Wow, that's interesting, because when I first started my business, everybody's like, you got to read Think and Grow Rich. You got to read Think and Grow Rich. And I read it. And for that moment, I'm just like, oh, this is really cool. I liked it. I feel like, I was able to apply some really cool things to my life. But then I dug a little bit deeper and I realized that pretty much all the people that he said that he had talked to, that it was a lie. So now we're coming full circle, and I'm so glad to have you clear that up. You said you worked with W. Clement Stone. How was that?
Well, it was a roller coaster. I mean, he hired me to be president of a behavioral consulting firm here in Rhode Island, in Providence. He owned 40 companies, and this was one of the 40.
Wow.
And he owned the Bass Fishing Network. He owned this, he owned that. But basically, although Stone talked about positive mental attitude, he made his money in the insurance business. And what he sold was burial insurance. It was 2 cents a week. He'd go through these tenements in the 20s and 30s, the sweatshops. And the trouble was, if you died back then and you had no insurance, you'd be buried in a pauper's field. So for 2 cents a week, he guaranteed people they'd have a dignified burial. It wasn't elaborate, but it was dignified. He made a fortune doing that. He hired some very smart financial people. He founded Combined Insurance, which he eventually sold for another fortune. Now, Stone was of the impression that he was wealthy because of his positive mental attitude. And I told him once, and this is what helped get me fired. I said, look, you don't have 400 million because of a positive mental attitude. You have a positive mental attitude because you have $400 million. And if you gave everyone $400 million, they'd all have a positive mental attitude. Well, he didn't like that. But he was a character. I mean, he used to have this huge caddy limo from, the 80s or something. And sometimes I would drive it and he'd sit in the back. And sometimes he'd drive it and I'd sit in the back.
Wow.
And in the glove compartment was a pad of self-stick notes. And it said, and then you would check off, property, vehicle, animal has been struck by W. Clement Stone. Call this number for reimbursement. And I would stick that on whatever he hit. True story.
Oh my! So he was a horrible driver.
He was terrible. When I knew him, he was 85.
Oh. Oh man, that is incredible. So I bet you learned a lot from working with him. It sounded like he was a good man, except for when he fired you for telling the truth.
Well, listen, he was a good man. He was charitable. He was philanthropic. He was married for a long, long time. I think his wife's name was Jessie. When we met them, and they were nice people otherwise. But he just had this fixation on positive mental attitude with no basis behind it, really. And what I learned was that gimmicks don't work. I've written a hell of a lot of books, but reading one of my books isn't going to change your life. No one ever learned to ski by reading a book. It just makes you aware of some things. And the way people change is only through reinforcement on the job. So for you and me and people like us who are entrepreneurial, the problem is that a lot of people have left the corporate world and gone out on their own, and now they have a worse boss.
That's interesting. You say that. It reminds me of something that you said in your book. You mentioned that as an entrepreneur, somebody that's trying to build something, that they shouldn't read a lot of books in their field.
Well, that's right. You shouldn't read a lot of business books. You shouldn't read books in your field because the stuff sticks to you like flypaper. And after a while, with the best of intentions, no evil intent, you don't realize anymore where the idea came from. It wasn't your idea. It was somebody else's idea. But it stuck with you. You don't remember where it came from. But I get more out of reading fiction than I do out of reading business books. And I read biographies. I read history. I'm an eclectic reader. And the idea is to be a well-informed person and to be somebody who's an object of interest to others. And so you should be able to talk about the latest arts, the latest music, the latest Broadway plays, whatever it happens to be, so that you can converse with people who are in powerful positions, buyers. And, a buyer really doesn't want to sit down and hear about, McClellan or Hertzberg's hygiene theory or, Drucker's 5th book on strategy. They want to know tomorrow, how can my life be better? That's what they want to know.
Wow. I feel this is amazing. I feel like a kid right now because like I said, I've read a lot of your books. I've listened to some of your audio. I listened to one of your audiobooks yesterday, and just to hear your voice, you sound exactly how you read.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's like
everybody tells me that I sound the way I write and I write the way I sound, and there's no difference. So for example, I've recorded 5 or 6 of my books. So at one point, I think it was $1 Million Consulting. It was one of my big books. And McGraw-Hill decides they're going to have an actor do the audible. I said, first of all, I'm a professional speaker. I'm in the Speakers Hall of Fame. And people want to hear an author's voice. So I'm the perfect guy for you, and these audible books pay like $2,000 or $4,000. You don't get rich doing these. But they said, no, we're going to get an actor. But what ultimately happened is somebody bought the audible rights from them. And they got me to go down and record it in Connecticut. So
that's a good move for them, right?
I would think. You don't have a lot of mistakes with me. If I'm reading my own stuff, there aren't a lot of errors,
Wow. No, I agree. I really enjoy listening to your books, and some of the stuff you'll say something, I hear you chuckle a little bit like during it. It's very very personable. You One thing from listening to your book, The $1 Million Consultant, you list out all the things that you do. I know you're on Twitter, you're on LinkedIn, you're on Instagram, you have a blog, you have a podcast. I believe what over 200 something episodes, but yet you and I'm asking this question because I want to make this very I want to make this stick out to the people that are listening to this. But you're a one man show. Why is that?
Well, when I went out on my own and I decided to take the risks of being on your own, I decided to reap the rewards. And overhead kills you. It absolutely
Mm,
kills you. So I'm sitting here in my house. This is my den at the moment. I happen to be in my den. And I've got a couple of lights and a microphone, and I do this all the time. I'm interviewed once or twice a week. But I'll tell you a story to prove it. When I was fired, I said to my wife, I'm going to go look for office space. And she said, why are you going to do that? And I said, well, I'm on my own. She said, listen, you're a consultant. People aren't going to come to you. You go to them. I said, well, would it look good if I'll tell you what, if you find you need an office, we'll get one. But otherwise, so here I am, 35 years later, and I don't have an office. I'll tell you, though, that my kids went to private schools from kindergarten through undergraduate. So they went to private schools for 16 years each, two kids. That's 32 years of tuition. And the 32 years of tuition at the time, it's even worse today, but at the time, came to $450,000.
wow.
And $450,000 over 16 years is what I would have paid for the office and a secretary and insurance and repairs and so forth. So my wife had really good advice, as she always does. And so many people have assistants, virtual assistants, real assistants. I mean, people making $100,000 a year have an assistant. You don't need it. But it's for ego,
Mm.
and people, they always let's upgrade to the latest software. Well, do you need it? You know? So I think that if you want to make money in this business, it's not what you make really, it's what you keep. And you're not going to keep as much as you could if you're spending it on overhead.
Oh, that's beautiful. I wish I would have heard you say that when I went and rented out a studio. I rented out a studio. I'll tell you the craziest thing happened. We got this studio, and this is like where I was doing my podcast, and all of a sudden it was weird. It was like one thing started breaking after another. One thing started breaking. I mean, the big TV that we had put on the wall, the fancy lights, the camera, all of it broke. And then I ended up going to just a regular camera. And I was just like, okay, this looks just as good. We moved out of the office and I moved here into my house. And the backdrop and everything, it looks exactly the same as if we were in the studio, but we're saving money. And I get to just come up and downstairs as I please. I can go kiss my wife right now, which that is beautiful. But often I notice, and I'm saying this because I felt for this, it's like the perception, I think you said, is the perception of depth, right? Or to make it look like you're bigger than what you are or your
Well,
organization, right?
it's low self-esteem. My company's name is Summit Consulting Group, which is just a legal entity. The brand is my name. But
Mhm.
when I started it, I thought Summit Consulting Group gave it heft. If I had to do it all over again, I would never name it that, because it wasn't important. Nobody cared. And, in 35 years of consulting, I was only asked where I went to school one time. I've never been
Mm.
asked if I belong to, the National Speakers Association or the Institute of Management Consultants or all these initials you can trail after your name. And although, I'm in the Hall of Fame and I'm a fellow in the Institute of Management Consultants and all this, nobody cares. All they care about is what kind of value you can bring. And so I specialized in providing original creative value for people where they didn't care how old I was or where I came from or anything like that. They just said, this guy can help me.
I feel like my head is exploding right now, and I know our listeners, their heads are exploding because you're saying almost everything that's the opposite of what we know and what we do or what we know or what we think we should do. When did this start click? When did this all? Is there a moment where you're just like, "Ha, I got it now. It's
Well,
clicking."
yeah, I mean, when I went out on my own, I said to myself, I'm basically lazy, really. And I said to myself, this is before the internet, right? And I said, God, I got to get home. I was traveling 80% of the time, and I couldn't wait to get home from a client. So I'd condense things, I'd make them faster. And I found out that the client didn't care. The client just cared that things got done. I mean, if somebody said, well, we want you here 4 days a week, that was usually some dopey human resource people I really didn't care about. So I got it down to 66% or 62% or something. And I kept condensing and I kept finding faster ways to. And then before the internet, I started doing things remotely. I would do things by phone. And, Hewlett Packard was a client for 10 years. And they called me once at the beginning of December, right about this time. And they said, Alan, we need this project desperately. What would it take for you to do this? We need it by the end of the year. And I said, $50,000, and I'll get it done. And they said, fine, when will you be here? I said, well, I'm not coming. Now they're in Palo Alto, right? And I'm on the East Coast. They said, you're not coming. How are you going to do the project? I said, I've been working for you at that point for 8 years. I know you. You know me. I know who to call. I'll get it done. And so they said, well, okay. They had no choice. And I got it done. I never set foot for that project on their property. And you have to realize that the consultants, coaches, expert, they make this mistake of thinking their physical presence is important. It's not. Their time isn't important. Lawyers charge by the hour. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so what we have to do is understand our own value first. The first sales to ourselves. And if we understand that, then we can say to people, here's the value of what I'm doing. And the change I made, by the way, when I first went out on my own and I was starting to make sales, I said, how can I increase my fees? And I realized that's not the question. You don't ask how to increase fees. And I tell people this today. What you ask is, how do I create more value? And so what I did was I changed my proposals. My proposals had objectives and measures of success. I added a third component: objectives, measures of success, value. And when the client saw the value and they looked at my fee and they saw it was a 10-to-1 return, I mean, where the hell else are you getting 10-to-1 unless you bought Apple stock, when it was 17? I did.
That's man, this is great. By you saying that and bringing up value, that it brings me to a point you bring up in your book, evangelicals, the importance of evangelicals. So where did that concept come from for you?
Well, again, before the internet, I looked for scalability, which is a big thing today, scalability. And I realized that you can't do it yourself. You need other people. And so people will be your evangelists if you do a great job and they tell other people. I call this the chain reaction of attraction, which is I trademarked. They tell other people because they're doing somebody else a favor. And they'll say, look, you want to get into consulting, you need to read this guy's books and go see him. Or in the corporate world, they say, you want to reorganize or you want to do strategy, you need to talk to this guy first. And so when you start to get unsolicited referrals, the evangelism is working.
Wow. I actually saw somebody on, I think it was LinkedIn the other day. He was basically paying you some homage. And I love the comment. He had this beautiful chart, this beautiful chart that he had put together. And he's like, oh, this is from the great Alan Weiss. And you chimed in and said, you're missing one thing there, pal.
You miss value, right?
And he missed value, the biggest thing. And I was laughing. I was laughing because I saw that post and I was like, that's interesting. I don't see value there because I had been taking notes on some of the stuff that you have done. And man, I really appreciate that. I appreciate your approach to things. I've noticed that you don't pull any punches. From the very moment that you and I started speaking, I sent you a message. It was maybe 2 years ago, probably on Instagram. You probably don't remember that, do you?
No, and I barely ever look at Instagram anyway.
Yeah, I said, hey, Alan, I'm a big fan. I love to have you on my podcast. You wrote back and you said, I don't do this on Instagram. Email me.
Right.
What's the significance of that? And just so that you can know, I stopped doing that. But that's for you. And I'm just thinking, what's your mindset behind that?
Well, a woman wrote me yesterday on LinkedIn. Said you have a notification, and she wanted to do an interview with me, and she was legit. She had a good background, but I said, move this to email. And the reason is I check my email every day and I get back to people ferociously. People do not want instant access today. They don't expect to call you when you pick up the phone, but what they want is fast responsiveness. And so I am highly responsive. As you got me to do this, I was very responsive. You never had to wait more than maybe 24 hours at the worst. So I don't always check LinkedIn. I don't always look at Instagram. I rarely look at Instagram. I sometimes look at text, but email is the way to contact me. And so if you want me to do something, you have to use my preferred way of doing things. I was talking to somebody I'm coaching earlier today, and I said, if you want to get referrals, here's a script that you can use. We role played it when you call people. I said, nobody calls people anymore. I said, all the more reason to do it. But the fact is, you try to put a request for a referral in email, it's going to get lost in the noise. And it's too easy for them to turn it down or to pretend they didn't get it. But if you talk to somebody about getting a referral, you'll get that referral.
Oh, I love that. You said your way of doing things.
Yeah. If you want me to do you a favor, yeah.
I just had a realization. I feel like one thing that I've done in the past and even right now is been to other people way of doing things. And and I'm not even just talking about consultant or coaching or anything like that. I'm saying, even if I'm doing them a favor, like going on their podcast, is there a moment that stick out to you where you were like, okay, I need to put some brakes on this and stop doing that?
Well, I got really popular after $1 Million Consulting. It was my 4th book, right? And for 4 years after that, I was answering questions for free. My ego was bloated. People would write me, they'd call me, and I was good. And after 4 years, I was spending so much time on this. I said, this has to stop. So I said, I told my wife, I'm going to charge people. And she said, I don't think anybody will pay you to mentor them. I said, well, then they'll stop calling me if they know there's a fee. She said, well, what are you going to charge? Did you do any research? I said, I'm charging $3,500 at the time. And she said, where'd you get that number? I said, it's the monthly lease on the Ferrari. If I get 12 people, I pay for the Ferrari. It's a true story. And I got a lot more than 12 people. And I had 3 Ferraris.
Oh, my God. Are you serious?
And I had 3 Ferraris, and an Aston, and 2 Rolls Royces, and 4 or 5 Bentleys. No, 7 Bentleys. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm speechless. So that's how the mentorship came about. You blew up.
Yes.
People start reaching out to you, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna put a stop to this.
And I wanted to monetize it. And so I started by mentoring, and $3,500 was, for 6 months, extremely reasonable at the time. Then that went to coaching. Then that went to one of my elite programs called CATON, which stands for Kick Ass and Take Names. And now I have concierge coaching. And so these are higher and higher levels of more and more intense coaching. But, people double, triple, whatever their income when they deal with me for these amounts of time. Plus, you get into my community, my global community. So I am accused of doing things I love and making money at it. And that's just fine, because that's exactly what my strategy is. I do things I love and I make money.
Wow, I don't see nothing wrong with that. I think that beats doing stuff that you hate and making very little money.
That's right.
Man, that is, I think that is so cool. And it took me a very, very long time in figuring out, because when I first left my corporate job, I thought that, I needed to continue to do all the things that I hated in order to build my business. But it's exactly the opposite. Like, I get to do amazing stuff, like talk to you, and sooner or later I'll be able to make some money off of this episode, right? And I'm learning too, and I think that is so cool. But for the longest, I felt guilty over having fun at work, almost like a punishment.
Well, let me give you an example for your watchers and your listeners here. If you think of a double axis chart, and one axis is passion and the other axis is importance. If you're doing something that you're passionate about and it's highly important, you have a calling, right? And nothing gets in your way, and you find out, and you never regret doing it, and you're never tired of it, right? If it's the opposite, and what you're doing, you have no passion for it, and it's unimportant, you're just wandering. You're wandering off in the dark. There's no sense to what you're doing. Now, if what you're doing is important, but you have no passion, That's a grind. That's a 9 to 5 job. And opposite, if you're very passionate, but something's not important, that's an addiction. Now, I'm addicted to Angry Birds. I play Angry Birds all the time. Harmless, right? I'm addicted to cars. I'm addicted, I love cigars and fine wine and all that. However, some people are addicted to drugs and alcohol and so forth. And so a lot of people simply indulge their passion, even though the passion's not important. And that's not good either. So what we need in life is this calling where we're passionate and it's important work.
Wow. Coaching or consultant, which one are you more passionate about, or speaking or writing?
Well, I don't make a difference. I mean, look, I'm an expert. And as an expert, I can speak, I can publish, I can consult, I can advise, I can train, I can coach, I can do all kinds of things. And so I always thought that coaching, and I still do, coaching is a subset of consulting. I have never met a really excellent consultant who didn't have to coach. You have to coach people in the new procedures you put in, you have to coach them how to do things differently. However, not every coach is a consultant. Some coaches strictly help people with behavior change, but they can't look at organizational structure and things like that. And I'll also offend some more people by telling you that I don't believe to coach you need any kind of certificate from anybody. Now, you don't need any blessing from anyone.
Thank you.
In the book you referenced, $1 Million Coaching, I ask at the outset of the book, did anyone ever come to you for advice? If they did you give it to them? If you gave it to them, were they successful? And if the answer to that is yes, congratulations, you're a coach.
Wow. So it's that simple. Yeah. When I first got into coaching, I went and did the John Maxwell coaching program. I got that. And I was a little bit underwhelmed for how much I paid. And then I realized, I got the coaching in me already. I don't need all of this stuff, but I think it goes back to the lack of self-esteem. And I see a lot of people doing it too.
You got it. It's the lack of self-esteem. So you need a third party to validate you. So you have these universities, coaching universities and so forth. But, the question I always ask is who certifies the certifiers? I mean, really, these aren't people coming off the mountain with, 10 commandments. So I think that you have to have the courage of your talent. That's what I call it. And we're all coaches or can be coaches if we simply have the value that we're trying to help somebody else and not just feed our ego or not just take money.
I love that. I was going to ask you, and this is for me personally, I struggle sometimes with telling people I'm a coach. And the reason is because I see so many other people that are coaches, and I know that they're out there scamming. And I'm just like, man, I don't want them to think that I'm out here scamming too. Is that self-esteem?
Well, I don't think that's a self-esteem problem, but my suggestion to you would be stop calling yourself a coach, just call yourself an expert. And somebody says, well, how would you help me? Here's my issue. And you say, well, I'd help you in this manner and we'd achieve these goals. And here's what it'd be worth to you. You don't have to say that you coach them at all as a verb. You don't have to use it as a noun. You're going to help them to improve. And, that's really what great teachers do. They're really coaching, but they call themselves teachers. So I wouldn't worry about the term so much. I would worry about what your intent is. And just because you have a certificate quoting anything, it doesn't mean a damn thing. I tell people I've written so many books, but I tell people just because somebody writes a book doesn't make them an expert. And just because you read a book doesn't make you educated. And so the question is, how valid is it and how applicable is it?
Wow. I think that's beautiful. I think that is how did you get all of this stuff?
Well, you have to look around. That's why I say just reading business books is a waste of time. You have to look around and understand what's going on around you. We go to Nantucket every August, and I get up early in the morning and I write. I have a den in the house up there, and so I'll look out early in the morning. There are always robins on the lawn pulling worms out. And of course the phrase is the early bird gets the worm. But I'm thinking, yeah, but the early worm gets caught. And so you have to be willing to look at things in a different way. And once you say something to somebody in a different way, and they say, I never looked at it like that, you've got them. You've got them.
Wow. Do you still travel the world and speaking, or do you do a lot of stuff from virtual?
Most of the travel I do is either for pleasure. My wife and I were just in Rome and Vegas. We're going to Buenos Aires in April. We'll go to Florida in January. Most of it's pleasure, but some of it is accompanying business, because I have groups of people I put together who meet on their own. I call them growth cycles, and they help each other. And then, but I participate. I'll visit them at a meeting, or I'll visit them on Zoom. So it's about 50-50. It's for business and pleasure. And my wife usually comes along, and we have a good time.
Yeah, that's a big goal for me is our kids in the next few years, both of our youngest kids, they'll be out of the house. And that is one thing I told my wife. I would love to be able to work from my laptop at the beach somewhere, maybe go to a couple conferences, but us travel the world together. So I'm really inspired by that. I think that is so cool. I actually told her that. I was just like, oh, I just got an email from Alan. He said that him and his wife, I think you said that y'all were in Rome. And I was like, man, how cool, how freaking cool is that? But yeah, so it a question that I had for you, the three parts of a sale. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Well, I think there are four parts of a sale, and that is this. And the first part is you build trust. So let's say you have an hour with a buyer. The first, and if it's not a buyer, all bets are off. But if it's a buyer, the first 10 to 15 minutes, you establish trust. You talk about perhaps their industry, their market, their company. You answer some questions about yourself, and you converse. There's no sales pitch. There's nothing like that. Never go in with any kind of deck or electronics. The second
Ooh,
part,
say that again. Thank you.
the second part is you identify issues that are important. So this is the second 10 to 15 minutes. And the client either says, here's what we're facing today that's tough, or you say, listen, how you doing dealing with hybrid workers? Have you got that mastered yet? And they say, well, hell no. I say, well, nobody does. Let me tell you what I know. Then the third part, third 10 to 15 minutes, is what I call conceptual agreement, which you know about. That's the objectives, measures, and value. And that's the heart of the proposal. So I'm ready to give a proposal and send it in the mail. But the fourth part, the final 10 to 15 minutes, so this takes 40 to 60 minutes. The final is what I call pouring cement. And what I say to the buyer is there anything we haven't discussed other than fees? Because you'll see the fees in my proposal. I have to think about the fees. But is there anything else we haven't discussed that might lead you not to accept one of the options I give you? And if so, let's discuss it while we're together.
What if they say, what are their fees? I need to see them right now.
No, you don't. You don't need to see him now. You don't need to see him in an hour. You'll see them tomorrow morning. Nothing's going to change between now and tomorrow morning.
Have you ever had that issue where they wouldn't do business with you because you didn't have the fees on you?
I've had the statement, but I've never failed to do business because of it. Another line I use is this. Listen, Tony, if you force me to give you a fee now, it'll probably be too high. I need to think this through carefully so I can give you the best possible investment arrangement. But I need time to work that out. So I provide you with equitable work, and you provide me with equitable compensation.
That's beautiful. I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this morning. Do you still practice saying your fees in the mirror?
I don't practice it, but I tell other people to. You've got to say, the fee's $100,000, and you can't start to giggle.
Yeah, no, I noticed that, and I still do this, and I'm not going to act like I don't. Whenever I get to the part where I'm saying how much it is, I get anxious. Like I'll say, oh, it's three. I'm just like, what is wrong with me?
Well, that is an esteem issue. You don't think you're worth it, and you're afraid that the prospect's going to say you're not worth it, and so this is fear. But I'll tell you something, and for everybody listening, 100,000 ain't what it used to be. When I started 35 years ago or so, there were 7 cars in the U.S. that sold for $100,000. Today, there are 32. And so people are spending 100,000 to mist the plants in the offices, to get snow off the parking lot. So 100,000 ain't what it used to be. So you've got to have the right understanding of your own value.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'm getting that. So after, and I'm just rapid firing because I know you got to go soon, but after you get the contract, as far as consulting, you have this phrase that you use: scope creep and scope seep. Can you get into that for me a little bit?
Excuse me, Tony. Scope creep occurs when the client asks you to do more things than are contracted for. It says, as long as you're here, can you interview some people for me? As long as you're here, can you do the windows? However, a lot of people have, everybody knows about scope creep. You shouldn't do it. A lot of people have scope seep, which is a term I coined. And scope seep is you're so nervous about being accepted that you say to the client, hey, while I'm here, would you like me to interview some people? Or while I'm here, should I do the windows? Because you don't feel justified. You don't feel that your value is sufficient. And so you have to eschew both of those. You have to eliminate both of those, because those are the things that cut into your margin. So you don't keep what you're really making.
That makes sense. So again, that sounds like a self-esteem issue for the consultant.
It is.
That's it seems like that's what it goes back to. Like in a lot of the deficiencies that consultants and coaches have is their own self-esteem. Is that right?
Yes, that's why I have a worldwide community, because people need to get together and talk to each other. They need not to be so alone. They need to have feedback. They need to see people who started where they did and now are making, millions of dollars. They need to talk to people who, when they're making 600,000, they need to talk to people who are making 50,000 and help bring them up, because when you coach people, you get better too. And so people need to communicate. And as you and I are talking right now on allensforums.com, which is one of my platforms, there are people from all over the world talking to each other about fees and marketing and ethics and politics and everything else. And so it's a virtual community that allows people not to feel so alone and builds their self-esteem.
I love that. It reminds me of me and my son. My son, he's an entrepreneur too. And sometimes he'll come over. My wife always says, y'all better not just be talking about business all the time. But it's just like, dude, that is the thing that, that if I called him right now, he's working on some issue or some problem, or he's trying to fix something for somebody in business. And this is the same thing kind of with me. That's what we relate to, is like entrepreneurs. Sometimes we can get extremely lonely. Who do you connect with to make you feel that sense of community? Is it just those folks, or do you have other folks?
Well, this is a global community. We're talking about thousands of people. So that's my laboratory, and so before the end of the day here, I'll go back to my forum, see who's talking about what. Some other people might write me and ask for some advice because they're part of my coaching programs. So this is my global laboratory. But the person who really is at the center of this is my wife. And the two of us eat dinner out every night, 7 days a week. And we debrief. I say, here's my day. Here's what happened. She'll give me advice. She might say, here's what happened on the board that I'm on. And, what do you think? That might take 10 minutes. It might take the whole dinner. And that's a way to get external feedback that you have to consider.
One more question for you. And again, I'm jumping around. You said, where was I going with this? You said that never do pro bono for a for-profit organization. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I believe in being philanthropic, and I believe that you do pro bono work for nonprofits because they need the help. So you can write them a check, but it's much more important to give your time. However, if you're a for-profit, you pay for my advice. I don't give anything for free. For one thing, you set the wrong precedent. They keep expecting things for free, and that word will get around. But beyond that, if you're serious about making a profit and running a business, you want people to invest in you. You want them to buy your products and services. Well, if you want advice, you have to buy that too. You're no different.
That makes so much sense. So thank you for doing this, Alan. I really appreciate it. I'm curious, what's next for you?
I don't know. My newest book came out a week ago. It's called
Really?
Building Dynamic. Yeah, it's called Building Dynamic Business Communities. And in January, I'm running a 2-morning Zoom workshop on how you build your own communities, as a matter of fact. If anybody's interested in what I do, it's allenweiss.com, ALANWEISS.com. A lot of free resources, free video, free newsletters, free everything, audio, podcast. You mentioned the podcast. And I'm thinking of next year maybe doing a book on self-esteem. And I just finished my monthly Zoom workshops, and I've launched my 2025 Zoom workshop, so people can still get in on them if they want to. But I just take things as they come along at this point. The real wealth is discretionary time. And so, I use my time to make myself happy.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been so good. I mean, and I'm not just saying it. This has really been an honor, something that I could literally mark off of my bucket list of people that I want to have on the show. Is there anybody that you think would be a good fit to come on Leaders Lead the podcast?
If you send me an email, let me give it some thought.
Okay.
Now that I know how this goes, and I'll send you some suggestions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Did I miss anything? Is there anything that you want to say to the audience before we go?
I just want to say, have the courage of your talent. You're good at what you do. You have a lot of ability to help people. Don't hold it back. If you get up in the morning and say, "Oh God, another slow crawl through enemy territory. I got bills to pay. I got to ask for referrals." You're not going to be successful. But if you get up in the morning and say, "With another great day, who can I help?" It makes a big difference.
Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you, Tony. Take care.
Whew, that was great. If you enjoyed this podcast, well, I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you're still here with us, what I want you to do is head over to your favorite podcast and streaming network and give us a download, subscribe to the channel, and also let us know what you think about the show. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you for the things that you've done. Thank you for the things that you're doing. And especially thank you for the things that you're going to do, because I know that you're going to do something amazing.
Thank you for allowing me to travel with you on your journey. I want to say thank you for the things that you're doing, the things that you've done, and the things that you're going to do, because I know that you're going to do something truly amazing. Remember, I'm here to stand by you as you chase your dreams, lead with greatness, and continue to make a difference. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. I'll see you next time on Leaders Lead the Podcast. Peace.